Mated to the Lycan King, Part 2. Raven, the world around me felt like a dream, yet my heart pounded with a reality I couldn't escape. My lips still tingled from Lucian's kiss, the heat of his touch lingering on my skin. My wolf hummed in satisfaction, reveling in the bond that had been sealed. But my mind, my human side, was in chaos. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just a rogue, an outcast, a girl who had spent her life fighting to survive. And now, suddenly, I was meant to be queen? My mate was the Lycan King, the most powerful being in our realm? It was too much. Too fast. Panic clawed at my chest. My breath came too fast, too sharp. Lucian's eyes darkened with passion, searched mine, as if he could feel my hesitation. My lips parted, but no words came out. I couldn't breathe. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I ran. Spinning on my heel, I bolted into the forest, my muscles burning as I forced my legs to carry me away. Away from the truth I wasn't ready to face. Away from the mate I couldn't accept. Raven! Lucian's voice was sharp, commanding. My wolf whimpered at the sound of her mate's call, but I ignored her. Raven, stop! But I couldn't. I needed space, I needed air, I needed to figure out who I was before I let fate decide it for me. Lucian. She ran. The moment our lips parted, she turned and vanished into the night, her scent disappearing into the dense forest. My body screamed to chase her, to drag her back where she belonged, at my side. My wolf raged inside me, howling in frustration. She was mine, my Lycan mate. But I forced myself to still. If I chased her now, I would only be confirming her fears, that I was a beast who took what he wanted, without regard for her feelings. No. I had to let her go and give her space. Darius appeared at my side, his sharp eyes watching the direction Raven had fled. He let out a low sigh, crossing his arms. "You're letting her go?" he asked, his voice carrying both understanding and concern. I clenched my fists, every instinct demanding I chase after her, but I shook my head. "She needs time," I muttered, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. Darius studied me for a moment before nodding. "You know she'll come back to you. The bond won't let her stay away for long. But until then, you need to keep your wolf in check. The pack is already watching closely. If they sense weakness, I am not weak," I growled, my eyes flashing dangerously. Darius smirked slightly but held up his hands. "Of course not, but you, my friend, are a king, and a king cannot afford to look desperate. Give her space, but don't lose sight of her. You know she's meant for you." His words did little to ease the tightness in my chest, but he was right. I had to be patient, even when every part of me burned to claim what was mine. "Do you want us to track her?" I clenched my fists, my muscles tightening with restraint. "No, not yet. Give her space." Darius nodded. This was something deeper, something that had to play out on its own. Still, the thought of her out there alone, vulnerable, made my blood boil. I turned back toward the palace, my mind already working through how I would bring her back. She was scared, overwhelmed, but she was my mate. She would return to me, and when she did, I would make sure she never ran again. Raven. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest. The night air was sharp against my skin, but I welcomed the cold. It reminded me that I was still in control, still free. Ella was close behind me, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she caught up. "Raven, what the hell was that?" she demanded. "You just left the Lycan King standing there after that kiss?" I shook my head, running a shaky hand through my tangled hair. "I don't know, Ella. I can't do this. It's too much." Ella grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to meet her gaze. I stiffened at the intensity in her eyes, my heart pounding as her words cut through my turmoil. A part of me wanted to believe her, to accept that I was meant for more than just surviving. But doubt curled in my chest, whispering that I was still just a rogue, an outsider pretending to be something I wasn't. Did I truly belong here? Could I ever be the queen Lucian needed me to be? My throat tightened, uncertainty tangling with the longing that stirred deep inside me. You have to stop thinking you're just a rogue. You shifted, Raven, and not into just any wolf. You're a Lycan. That means something. My stomach twisted, and what if I don't want it to mean anything? What if I just want to be me? Ella's expression softened. You're scared. I get it. But running isn't going to change who you are. And it's definitely not going to change the fact that Lucian is your mate. I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. I needed time, space. But deep down, I knew Ella was right. Before I could respond, a low voice interrupted the quiet of the night. Well, the so-called queen has run away. How pathetic. A figure stepped into the moonlight, her presence instantly grating on my nerves. She was tall, with flowing blonde hair and sharp, calculating eyes. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was something cruel about the way she smiled. Who are you? I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. She tilted her head, amusement dancing in her expression. You don't know? I'm Selene. And before you came along, I was the one meant to be Lucian's mate. A cold dread settled in my stomach, and she smirked. And I'm here to make sure you don't ruin what's mine. Ella let out a low growl, stepping in front of me before I could react. You don't belong here, Selene, and you sure as hell don't have any claim over Lucian. Destiny chose Raven as his fated mate. Selene's smirk faltered for a brief second before she sneered. A rogue could never be queen. Ella took a step forward, her presence crackling with defiance. She already is, and if you have a problem with that, I suggest you take it up with the Lycan King himself. Selene hesitated, her calculating eyes flickering between us before she scoffed. This isn't over. You don't belong here. You never will. With one last glare, she turned on her heel and disappeared into the shadows, her scent fading with the wind. I let out a shaky breath, my entire body trembling. Ella placed a firm hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Don't let her get inside your head, Raven. She's just bitter because Lucian never wanted her. I swallowed hard, my mind swirling with uncertainty. What if she's right? What if I don't belong here? Ella squeezed my shoulder. Then prove her wrong. You are more than a rogue. You are strong, Raven. And whether you accept it or not, you were born for this. Her words settled in my chest, warm and grounding. I still didn't have all the answers, but for now I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Selene decide my fate. Come on, Ella said, nudging me gently. Let's go back. By the time we reached the pack house, exhaustion had begun to set in, but the sight that awaited us wiped away any lingering doubt or fatigue. The headmaid stood at the grand entrance, her expression composed but expectant. Welcome back, Luna, she said with a respectful bow. The title sent a ripple of uncertainty through me, but before I could react, she continued. Your suite has been prepared, as is customary. Ella's eyes widened as we followed the maid inside and up the grand staircase, past hallways lined with golden sconces and rich tapestries. When the double doors to my new living quarters swung open, I inhaled sharply. The Luna suite was breathtaking. A massive four-poster bed with intricate carvings dominated the center of the room, draped in deep navy and silver fabrics. A big, beautiful fireplace crackled to one side, casting flickering light across the polished floors and velvet-covered seating areas. Candles glowed from every corner, their soft scent mixing with the fresh night air that drifted in through a set of towering windows. Beyond them, a sprawling terrace overlooked the vast moonlit lands, the view stretching endlessly into the distance. A plush sitting area and an ornate writing desk sat neatly arranged near the grand walk-in closet, its doors slightly ajar, revealing empty shelves waiting to be filled. To the right, an opulent bathroom awaited, complete with a massive soaking tub carved from dark stone, glistening under the soft chandelier light. Gold fixtures adorned the space, while plush towels and fine soaps had already been laid out. It was a far cry from the cramped, cold spaces I had known all my life. Raven, look at this place, Ella breathed, spinning in awe. This is where you belong, and I even have a room. She pointed at a connected chamber, one usually reserved for a nanny, but still a considerable upgrade from what either of us had ever known. A small group of maids entered, bowing slightly before approaching me. "Luna, we've drawn your bath. We have prepared some basic garments for now, but your wardrobe will be tailored soon to fit your station." Still overwhelmed, I let them lead me into the luxurious bathroom, where warm water and fragrant oils awaited. I sank into the tub, my tense muscles finally relaxing. The maids worked carefully, washing away the dirt and tension, their hands gentle but efficient. When I emerged, I was dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, the fabric far softer than anything I had ever worn before. As I stepped back into the main suite, Ella flopped onto the grand bed, sighing dramatically. "I vote we sleep right here tonight." I chuckled, but the idea was tempting. My heart was still heavy with uncertainty, my mind racing with doubts, especially after that threatening encounter. But at least for tonight, I wasn't alone. I crawled onto the bed beside her, letting the warmth and softness embrace me. As the fire crackled and the soft glow of candles flickered around us, Ella whispered, "You've come so far, Raven, and this is only the beginning." For the first time, as sleep crept in, I allowed myself to believe she might be right. Encouraged by Ella, I finally gathered the courage to seek out Lucian. My heart pounded as I approached his study, my fingers curling into nervous fists at my sides. The guards stepped aside at my presence, allowing me entrance. Lucian was standing by the window, his back tense, his hands folded behind him. The moment I stepped inside, his head turned, his gray eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. "Raven," he said, his voice low, controlled. But I could sense the tension beneath it. I swallowed hard. I wanted to apologize for running. Before I could finish, Lucian was in front of me, closing the distance between us with unnerving speed. "You needed time, I understand that," he said softly. "But that doesn't mean I enjoyed watching you leave." His fingers brushed against my arm, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down my spine. "You are mine, Raven. And no matter how much you fight it, no matter how much time you think you need, the bond will always bring you back to me." My breath caught, my heart racing. The logical part of me wanted to push him away, to demand more time. But my wolf ached for him, for the connection that had been forged between us the moment I shifted. His touches sending an electric current through my body. Lucian's gaze darkened as he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "The more you shift, the more you'll understand what you are, what we are. And when that time comes, you will never doubt where you belong again." I shuddered, my body betraying me as heat pooled in my core. He was right. I could feel it. And no matter how much I wanted to fight it, I knew I was only delaying the inevitable. I was his, and he was mine. This morning, the entire kingdom was buzzing with whispers and speculation of what happened last night. The news of Raven's shift, of what she truly was, had spread like wildfire. A rogue turned Lycan Queen. It was unheard of, and the reactions were mixed. Some spoke of her transformation in reverence, whispering about the return of an ancient bloodline. Others doubted, questioning how someone born outside of the Lycan elite could wield such power and stand beside the king. Even within the palace walls, warriors and nobles debated in hushed voices. Some believed fate had chosen Raven for a reason, while others saw her as an anomaly, an unworthy outsider thrust into a position she did not deserve. The tension was palpable, and the weight of their judgment loomed over the castle like an impending storm. But the reach of this revelation extended far beyond the kingdom's borders. The news had traveled across lands, reaching those who had once cast Raven aside, those who would see her fall before they accepted her as their queen. Raven and Ella couldn't ignore the shifting atmosphere within the pack. Whispers followed Raven wherever she went, some filled with awe, others with skepticism. Even among the castle staff, tensions were rising. Some maids and warriors accepted Raven's presence while others remained hesitant, unable to fully accept a former rogue as their future queen. One evening, as Raven and Ella walked through the Packlands, they noticed the stark contrast between the palace's grandeur and the struggles of ordinary pack members. The further they wandered, the more evident it became that some parts of the Packlands had been neglected. The marketplace was worn, families struggled to maintain their homes, and the orphanage, a place that should have been a sanctuary, was falling apart, a painful reminder of the life Raven had endured. Ella turned to Raven, eyes filled with determination. "We can change this." Raven hesitated. "Do you really think they would listen to me?" Ella grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You're their Luna. Whether they like it or not, you have the power to make things better. Let's start with the orphanage. No child should ever go through what we did." A spark lit within Raven. She may not have been ready to fully embrace her role as queen, but she could do this. She could make a difference. That night, as the castle settled into quiet, Raven sat in her chambers, her mind restless. With a flickering candle casting shadows on the walls, she scribbled ideas onto a parchment, her thoughts consumed by what she had seen in the Packlands earlier that day. Images of the Packlands, the struggling families, and most of all, the neglected orphanage, haunted her thoughts. She couldn't ignore what she had seen, the stark contrast between the grandeur of the palace and the hardships of the pack members. This was her home now, and if she was to be queen, she wanted to change things for the better. The next morning, with the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon, Raven made her way to Lucian's study, the parchment clutched tightly in her hands. Determination burned in her chest as she prepared to present her vision for the pack. He was seated at his desk scanning over reports, but the moment she entered, his gaze lifted, and a small smile played on his lips. "You look brighter this morning," he observed, a hint of approval in his tone. "Did you rest well?" Raven hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, clutching the parchment in her hand. I wrote down some ideas," she admitted, "things that need to change in the Packlands. I noticed how much has been neglected, especially the orphanage. I want to help rebuild it, along with improving the market, homes, and social structures to support the weaker members of the pack. I know I'm new here, but I want to do something real." Lucian listened intently, his expression unreadable at first. Then slowly, his gaze darkened, not with disapproval, but with deep thought. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping against the armrest, processing her words carefully. "After all the wars, maintaining order, and ensuring peace across the werewolf realm, we have neglected our own people," he admitted. "Justice and power have always been my focus, but these responsibilities, the care of the pack, are traditionally carried by the Luna." His words settled heavily in the space between them. Then slowly, he nodded. "I am proud of you for thinking of this," he continued, his voice softer now. "And you will have all the resources and authority you need to make it happen. Whatever you require, it is yours." Raven felt something warm settle in her chest at his words. She had expected resistance or at least hesitation, but instead, he had given her full support. For the first time, she felt as if she was stepping into something bigger than herself, not because of a title, but because of the difference she could make truff her voice. With Lucian's full support behind her, Raven wasted no time. She and Ella got help from Darius and immediately gathered the head architect, key advisors, and members of the pack leadership to discuss the reconstruction of the orphanage, improvements to housing, and better trade routes for the market. The meeting was intense, but as Raven spoke with passion and clarity, the skepticism in the room began to shift. This was her chance to rewrite her fate and the fate of those who had been forgotten. But while Raven worked to rebuild the pack, she began noticing small signs of discontent. Some pack members whispered when she passed, their expressions filled with doubt. Others outright avoided her, their loyalty to Lucian unquestionable, but their acceptance of her as Luna still uncertain. The more she worked to improve the pack, the more she overheard murmurs questioning her right to rule. And at the center of it all, Selene. Darius had begun to take notice of the growing whispers in the halls, particularly those surrounding Selene. Ever watchful, he observed how she moved within the court, planting subtle doubts among those already hesitant about Raven's rise. His instincts warned him that her presence was more than just bitterness. She was scheming. Not one to let threats linger, Darius sought out Lucian, finding him in the war room. "Selene is not letting this go," he said plainly. "I've seen how she speaks to the nobles and pack members, twisting their opinions. She is planting seeds of doubt, and if left unchecked, she will turn the court against Raven." Lucian exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "I did not suspected this much from her, but I have let her go her way for too long. It's time to remind everyone who they are and what their place is." Darius met his gaze, his expression unwavering. "Then we need to act before those seeds take root." Selene, still fuming from her previous confrontation with Raven, had escalated her efforts. She did not just whisper doubts in the corridors. She took every opportunity to publicly undermine Raven's presence. During a routine inspection of the market district, Raven had been discussing plans with merchants when Selene sauntered into the square, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "A queen should be marked," Selene drawled, her lips curling into a smirk as she eyed Raven. "Or at least, that's what I was always taught. Perhaps you're not as certain of your place here as you pretend to be." The crowd murmured, a few nodding hesitantly as the weight of Selene's words hung in the air. Raven felt their eyes flicker to her neck, where no mark yet rested. Heat flushed her skin, not in embarrassment but in anger. Selene was stoking the doubt that had already begun to spread. Before Raven could respond, Ella stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "She is queen because she is Lucian's mate. That is not for you, or anyone else, to question." Selene simply laughed, a melodic, mocking sound. "Oh, but isn't it? After all, the pack deserves a Luna who is certain of her place, not one who runs the moment things get too real." Raven clenched her fists, forcing herself to remain calm, but Lucian could feel everything trough the mate bond. Meanwhile, as tensions grew within the palace, news of Raven's rule had reached far beyond the borders. Deep within the lands of her former pack, her old alpha sat upon his throne, fury boiling in his blood. The rogue he had sentenced to death had not only survived but had ascended to a fate beyond comprehension. She was thriving, preparing to take a throne meant for true-born Lycan royalty. His grip tightened around the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening as his beta stood before him, his expression grim and uncertain. "It's true, Alpha," the beta reported hesitantly. "She shifted into a Lycan, and the Lycan King has claimed her." The Alpha's snarl echoed through the chamber, his rage barely contained. "A rogue queen? Never. She is a disgrace to our kind, and I will not allow her filth to taint the throne." His towering form cast a long shadow across the dimly lit hall as he rose abruptly, his fury crackling in the air. "Gather the others. We will not sit idly by while a rogue masquerades as our queen. This insult to our bloodline will not stand." War was coming, and he would ensure that Raven paid the price for daring to defy him. Raven and Ella had wasted no time in the renovations and improvements for the royal pack. With Lucian's full support, the plans quickly began to take shape. However, Raven couldn't shake the feeling of being watched and bullied by Selene. No matter where she went, she could sense Lucian's presence lingering close, his scent brushing against her senses like an invisible tether. What comforted? Why could she just not give in? Lucian struggled to stay away, though he tried to respect her space. The bond pulled at him constantly, making it nearly impossible to focus. Every moment she was near, her scent consumed his senses, driving his wolf mad with the need to claim her. He had led armies, conquered wars, and commanded loyalty from thousands, yet this one woman, his mate, was unraveling him piece by piece. He was losing the battle against himself, And the longer she kept her distance, the closer he was to breaking. Darius had taken notice of his alpha's unease. As beta, he had seen Lucian face countless battles, navigate political unrest, and command entire armies without faltering. But now, the great Lycan King was undone by one woman, his mate. One afternoon, as Lucian returned from an exhausting training session, Darius leaned against the entrance of the war room, arms crossed. "You do realize that running yourself into the ground won't make the bond go away, right?" Lucian exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm not trying to make it go away. I'm trying to control it." Darius smirked knowingly. "You're failing miserably, everyone can see it. You're distracted, restless. You're the strongest alpha in the realm, yet one woman has you acting like an untamed wolf." Lucian shot him a sharp glare, but Darius didn't back down. "If you want her, go after her. If you want to wait, then at least stop pretending you can just ignore this, because it's tearing you apart." Lucian clenched his jaw but said nothing. Darius sighed, shaking his head. "She's not running forever, Lucian. But if you keep holding back, someone else might reach her first." The thought sent a dangerous growl rumbling in Lucian's chest, his wolf bristling at the very suggestion. Darius simply smirked, knowing his words had hit their mark before walking away, leaving Lucian to his thoughts and his burning, inescapable need for his mate. Ella noticed Raven's struggle, the way her hands would tighten at her sides when she caught Lucian's scent, the way her eyes would dart to him in a crowd only to quickly look away. One evening, as they sat in Raven's suite reviewing plans, Ella set down her papers and gave her a pointed look. "You know you can't keep running from him forever," she said, crossing her arms. "The mate bond is only going to pull you two closer, and at this rate, it's driving you both insane." Raven exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. "It's not that simple, Ella. I need time, and every time he's near, it's like my thoughts stop making sense." Ella smirked knowingly. "And yet you always know when he's around. That says something, doesn't it?" Raven remained silent, biting her lip. "Just talk to him," Ella urged. "You owe that to both of you." With a reluctant sigh, Raven finally relented. The next day she found Lucian in the council chambers reviewing trade reports. He looked up the moment she entered, his sharp gray eyes locking onto her like he had been waiting for this exact moment. "Raven," he greeted, his voice deep and steady. He set down his papers, giving her his full attention. "I was wondering when you would stop avoiding me." Raven's lips pressed together. "I wasn't—" Lucian raised a brow. "You were—" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Fine. Maybe I was, but I just needed time to think." He nodded, waiting patiently for her to continue. She shifted on her feet before finally speaking. "I wanted to apologize for running that night after all you have done for me, and Ella. And I wanted to thank you for supporting the changes in the pack. It means a lot to me." Lucian leaned forward slightly, his gaze softening. "You don't have to thank me. I told you, Raven. I will give you whatever you need, and I'll wait, as long as it takes." Her stomach twisted at the sincerity in his tone, her wolf pushing at the walls she had built around herself. Sensing her hesitation, Lucian changed the subject. "Since you're so focused on improving the pack, I propose something. Let's start having meals together. It will give us time to discuss the progress and—" his eyes darkened slightly. "It will give me a reason to see you more often." Raven hesitated, but she knew there was no avoiding him forever. "All right. Just meals." A slow smirk tugged at his lips. For now. The bond between them pulled taut, an invisible thread binding them together, growing stronger with every passing moment. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, thick with longing and restraint. Lucian's presence was overwhelming, his scent wrapping around Raven like a possessive whisper, making it difficult to think, to breathe. Every time she shifted, it only intensified, the connection between them deepening, pushing them both to the very edge of control. The meals were not making it any easier. Lucian's jaw clenched, his usually composed demeanor faltering as he fought the instinct clawing at his chest. His wolf demanded he take what was his, to close the space between them and solidify the bond that fate had woven between them. But he held himself back, knowing that she needed to come to him willingly. "You feel it too, don't you?" His voice was rough, almost strained. "The bond, it's getting stronger." Raven's heart pounded as she met his gaze, the magnetic pull between them undeniable. She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to step closer, to surrender to the warmth he offered. But her wolf already knew the truth, whispering it into her very soul. She nodded, unable to deny it any longer. Lucian's entire body tensed, his wolf clawing violently at his restraint, demanding that he close the distance between them. The instinct to claim what was his nearly overwhelmed him, the mate bond now pulsing like a living force between them. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to maintain control. He was the king, and yet, around Raven, he felt like a man on the verge of madness. His nights had become restless, plagued by dreams of her scent, the warmth of her body just beyond his reach. Even during the day, when duties demanded his focus, his wolf would stir the moment her presence was near. During council meetings, he found himself distracted, his mind drifting toward her even when he fought against it. Every breath carried the weight of her presence, and his wolf raged at the distance she continued to place between them. Lucian clenched his fists, his control fraying with each passing day. He had spent years mastering himself, reigning in the beast within, but Raven was undoing him piece by piece. And no matter how much she ran, he knew one undeniable truth. Fate would not let her escape him forever. He trained relentlessly, sparred harder, and buried himself in council meetings, anything to maintain the appearance of control. But it was a thin mask, one that cracked more with every passing day. And when Darius walked in with giving the final report on Selene, her doings to Raven, Lucian, his wolf, howled powerfully. The whole pack land trembled, knowing absorbing the power that he radiated. He was mad. This lowly wolf had hurt his mate too many times. Nobody hurts my mate. Lucian clenched his fists, his patience had run out. With that howl, he summoned the entire pack to the central courtyard. The torches blazed as the warriors and nobles gathered, their voices murmuring about what was to come. When Raven arrived, she found Lucian standing at the center, his expression unreadable. Darius stood at his side, his arms crossed as he observed the pack. Then Lucian's voice rang out, his authority undeniable. "There have been whispers, doubts, and disrespect toward the one who stands beside me. I will make this clear. Raven is my fated mate, and that makes her your queen. Whether you accept it now or not, you will respect her and you will honor the bond that has been set by fate itself." The murmurs in the crowd were silenced by the weight of his words. Then, his gaze landed on Selene. "Step forward," he commanded. Selene hesitated, but she had no choice. As she approached, Lucian's gray eyes burned with fury. "You have spent your days whispering poison into the ears of my people. You have disrespected the woman who stands beside me and tried to turn this pack against its own Luna." Selene opened her mouth, but Lucian silenced her with a growl. "You are no longer welcome in my court. You will leave these lands and never return. Your loyalty has failed you, and your schemes end today." Selene paled, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape, but there was none. Two warriors stepped forward, prepared to escort her out. The punishment was public, final, and left no room for doubt. Lucian had chosen his mate. As the crowd dispersed, Raven stood frozen, watching as Selene was dragged away. The weight of Lucian's actions settled in her chest. He had saved her, protected her, defended her, and made a statement to his people that she was his, whether marked or not. He claimed her. That night she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, replaying his words, his actions, and the certainty in his voice. Relief and warmth curled inside her. He had defended her against the entire pack, had cast Selene out for trying to undermine her. But fear lurked in the shadows of her mind. Was she truly ready for this? For him? The idea of being marked was terrifying, final, yet, at the same time, the thought of rejecting it felt unbearable. Her wolf had been pleading, the bond tugged at her insistently, demanding she acknowledge what she already knew deep down. This wasn't just about fate, it was about choice. And her heart had already made it. And then, without thinking, she found herself standing outside Lucian's chamber. She knocked, barely able to breathe. The door opened, and Lucian stood there, shirtless, his expression unreadable. "Raven?" She stepped inside, her heart pounding. "I understand now. Why I need to be marked." Lucian's breath hitched, his wolf surging forward at her words. "Are you sure?" She met his gaze, determination shining in her dark blue eyes. "Yes." But beneath her resolve, uncertainty still lingered. She had never given herself to anyone before, had never known the kind of intimacy that came with the mate bond. A flicker of fear coursed through her. What if she wasn't ready? What if she disappointed him? Yet as she looked into Lucian's stormy gray eyes filled with restrained longing and unwavering patience, she knew she wanted this. She wanted him. As she closed the distance between them, Raven hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. Lucian's breath was unsteady, his wolf clawing beneath the surface, desperate to claim her. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. This was the final step, the moment that would bind them forever. But as Lucian gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing a soft line across her cheek, the fear melted away, replaced by something far deeper. His gray eyes burned with raw emotion, his restraint hanging by a thread. "Raven, once this is done, there's no going back. You will be mine in every way." She swallowed hard, but there was no fear left, only the undeniable pull of fate and the overwhelming warmth of love. "I know," she whispered, "and I want this. I want you, but I have never done this before." Lucian's expression softened, his wolf still raging beneath the surface. But he held himself back. He reached out, gently cupping her face, his thumb grazing her cheek with a tenderness that sent shivers down her spine. "Then I'll make sure it's perfect for you," he murmured, his voice filled with raw emotion. "You have nothing to fear, Raven. I will take my time and I will cherish all of you." His words sent warmth curling through her, melting away the last traces of hesitation. He would not rush her. He would make her feel safe, wanted, worshipped. And as she stepped closer, surrendering to the pull of fate, her fear melted away into something deeper, something undeniable. Lucian let out a shuddering breath before capturing her lips in a kiss that stole the very air from her lungs. Fire spread through her veins as their bond surged to life, growing stronger, fusing them together in ways beyond the physical. Every hesitation, every doubt faded as instinct took over. Their souls intertwined, sealing their fate as one. Lucian gently lifted Raven into his arms, carrying her with ease as he crossed the room. The firelight flickered against his skin, casting shadows that danced along the walls as he placed her down onto the bed, his movements slow and deliberate. His hands trailed to the edge of her nightgown, his fingers brushing against her skin as he met her gaze, silently asking for permission. Raven's breath hitched, but she gave him a soft nod, trusting him completely. With reverence, Lucian removed the fabric that separated them, his touch worshipping rather than claiming, ensuring she felt nothing but comfort and devotion. As he made love to her, the world outside faded, leaving only the heat between them, the electric connection that grew stronger with every touch, every whispered breath. Their bond pulsed, an unseen force pulling them closer, intertwining their very souls. The intensity built between them until, in the height of their passion, Lucian's instincts took over. His wolf surged forward, needing to complete what had always been fated. With a deep growl, he buried his face in the crook of her neck, his teeth grazing the soft skin, and as the moment peaked, He sank his fangs into her flesh, marking her as his. A rush of warmth spread through Raven as the bond ignited, sealing their connection in a way that went beyond the physical. A gasp left her lips as pleasure and power surged through her veins, her wolf howling in euphoric recognition of her mate. She belonged to him and he to her, completely, irrevocably. Lucian pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged, his lips stained with the proof of their bond. His stormy gray eyes softened as he gazed down at her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Mine," he whispered, his voice filled with unshakable devotion. Raven's breath hitched, her heart pounding as the finality of his claim settled over her. But she felt no fear, only warmth, only belonging. She reached up, her fingers brushing along his jaw before whispering back, "Yours." A deep growl of satisfaction rumbled in Lucian's chest again, his wolf basking in her acceptance. He leaned down, his tongue gently tracing over the fresh mark on her neck, his wolf rumbling in satisfaction as her body shivered beneath him. The healing would be swift with his touch, ensuring she felt pleasure rather than pain. "I will always take care of you, Raven," he murmured against her skin, sealing his vow with a reverent kiss over his mark. And as they held each other, wrapped in warmth and destiny, the bond settled, solidifying their future, together, as it was always meant to be.